Hello, and welcome to IDL, the Business Trailblazer podcast for seasoned innovators, rising disruptors, and inspiring leaders. I'm your host, Chris Britton, and today's bright business mind is Dominic Joyce of Maverick Otter. Dominic is a leader in talent acquisition and also a LinkedIn influencer. Dominic is sure to inspire you as well as help you see things from both the businesses and candidates' point of view. So let's kick things off. Welcome to the podcast, Dominic.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a long time coming, but excited to be here.
Exactly. Looking forward to this conversation. So, Dominic, tell us a little bit about Maverick Otter. So, how has this all been born and why has Maverick Otter come about?
Sure. So I guess Maverick Otter kind of started, and the name came about because, quite simply, Mavericks are quite a term like a disruptor, someone who goes against the grain, that tries to basically not conform to the normal ways of working. That's never seen as positive, always negative, but actually it's positive. Otter, honestly, because I love those animals. They're cute animals. They're very loyal. they're very protective. So they kind of blend work really, really well. And it was born out of the frustration of how right now the recruitment industry is more of a transactional environment rather than human centric. And that's kind of why I was like, right, well, as a recent job seeker, getting no traction, treated poorly by recruiters, hire managers being ghosted, interviewed and no feedback, I was like, surely someone needs to be there as the voice of the candidate to basically help champion and strive for excellence in hiring, but also educate companies on, and it sounds so simplistic, right, but just how to deal with candidates and how to manage a recruitment process and drive and engage in candidate experience, because it literally wasn't happening across a lot of companies right now.
This is something that you hear back as feedback from candidates all the time, then, I'm assuming. So this is when not only just from yourself, but you're hearing people's frustrations in that. It's not just something that's isolated to you, I'm assuming.
No, so I think if you look at LinkedIn as a whole, the problem that you've got is, and it's the most weirdest construct, right, is that it's about a service, right, because they're providing a service to you as a candidate. And what I find the most weirdest disconnect is, right, if we go to a supermarket or go to a restaurant and we get a bad meal, we tweet about it. We tag the restaurant in Instagram and say, not a great meal, or things. If you did that on LinkedIn and tagged in, I'll make it up, eBay, and said, oh yeah, really bad into your eBay, manager ghosted me several times, no one's going to side you there, because they'll say, right, that person's being bitter and basically being twisted because they didn't get the interview or didn't get the job. It's the most weird. It's a service, right? But it's the only type of service where if you complain about the service you receive, you're seen as being negative and you're seen as the moaner. Do it anywhere else where you buy a product or service, people side of you. Companies like, oh, we're really sorry, how can we fix it? So whilst it is prevalent on the platform, no one's naming and shaming right now. People are saying, I've been ghosted, bad experience. I have people that have had 5 months of waiting for feedback, like 10 steps interviews for short-term contracts. It's just been a really, really wild environment right now from someone who himself has been there for 5 months.
And do you think it differs at all when you've got in-house recruiters versus like these talent managers, talent acquisition managers, and then you've got people who are external recruitment agencies? Are the agencies more professional with their approach? Are in-house more professional? What would you say? Or is there no difference?
Ultimately, it's no different. So I put a post up on LinkedIn a while back showcasing my stats in my my recruitment journey, and I was ghosted 22 times, 8 times by internal, 14 times by agency. Now, agency, you don't allow for it, right? But it's almost been the kind of thing of, you chat to a recruiter, sometimes they'll put you forward to a role with a client, you know who the client is, but you never hear back. And that's always been like acceptable. But even just a note saying, hey, Don, we weren't shortlisted, is fine. You don't get that. So you assume they've been kidnapped, they're MIA, because you never hear from them again. They get the CV and go to market with it, and then you try and reach out to them to any kind of feedback. And that's, everyone say it's the expected agency because they always work with the best candidates, hence why they run with that. You could say it's the same internally, right? But they've almost got more of an obligation to kind of close off the process. But I've interviewed for companies in telecoms, in banking, where I've met with the heads of TA and then given them my time. They've missed calls to catch up with me several times. They've then interviewed me for an hour, sent generic rejection emails where I'm providing feedback that's constructive. That's kind of the problem itself there, right? Is that nobody's safe in any environment right now. And it used to be agencies were kind of prevalent and the more, I guess, bigger offenders. But people, again, I'm part of a lot of like senior leader groups on like WhatsApp groups about talking about jobs and sharing stories. everyone's getting the same thing, like elongated processes, 4-stage interviews for 3 months at FTC, weeks to get feedback from hire managers. It's consistently out of touch, and it's a cumbersome process now for anyone to get a job. So it happens across internal and external right now. That's the current problem in the current market.
So let's deconstruct that, because there's two parts there. There's the not feedback. There's no feedback, not following up, ghosting an individual. But then there's the part that you also mentioned where there's 4 or 5 stage interviews for something that is a 3-month fixed term contract, or where you've got 4 or 5 final interviews. It's like, how many finals are there finals? It's like when a graphic designer saves a final version of a graphic design. It's like, well, it's not quite final until the client says it's final, and you think it's final, but it's not quite there. So if we look at the first part, at this part of the 5 stages for an interview that's short, is there a concern about getting talent, or do you think that's because they don't know what they're doing, or what do you think's driving that? What is the key driver to add so many steps and make it so convoluted?
It's a mixture of not knowing what you want, first of all, because if you knew what you want, you wouldn't need 4 stages on a 3-month FTC. But also as well, right, you're afforded luxury of choice right now in the market, right? There's a lot of people in TA that are in the market looking for work. So like anything, if you're looking to buy a house or you're looking to buy a car, and there's a lot of cars in your budget, you're going to look at all the cars, aren't you? Let's just sit there and say, hold on a minute, what is it we really want for this role? What we define as what does good look like? I've had it where I've interviewed companies and it's been like an engineering. It's like, oh, we don't care that you're not engineering, we like your diversity and your range. Cool. Then you get rejected going, oh, we're going with someone who's got engineering experience. You're like, well, define what it is you want and make it a concise process. Because right now, you're having people do case studies. A lot of what's been done too as well from my research and feedback is that you're almost giving them free, roadmaps. You're giving them free toolkits as to how to do their hiring based on interviews. So a lot of it, again, is then meeting one person. Well, for meeting the CFO and the CEO, combine diaries or make it a lot more simplistic. That way, again, you keep the candidate engaged, you'll get a quicker hire, because, again, they work as well on time to hire, right? Metrics and companies, like you get judged on your time to hire and quality of hire. So it's a mixture of not knowing what they want ultimately, because they go out to market for a role. But if they know they want someone who's got a background of 3 years in tech hiring, stick with that. Don't then get in people that perhaps tick half the boxes, because you're elongating the process. Also, you're going to alienate a lot of candidates to think, well, why am I in play? Why am I waiting so long? And they almost get disengaged of it. So it's an understanding what you want. And also as well, right, is this role needed for the long term? Do we need just a short-term contract? Do we need a long-term contract? No one's asking those questions to define actually what it is you need in that role. Hence why you go out to market there, you know what you want, so you spend time looking at every candidate. You then get, as everyone's done with trying to buy a house or buy a car, there's too much choice there. You then become foggy and like, well, what is it I want? So again, you then take time away thinking what it is you want, and all the while, you build this really confusing process for both you as the hiring manager recruiter, but also the candidate, going, where am I in the process? What am I doing? Where am I wanted? Am I valued? I don't know.
So there's only so many questions you can ask, obviously, in an interview. Not this interview, but an interview from a recruitment point of view. So adding all these additional steps, I'm struggling to understand what they're gleaming from every additional step. So I've always worked with a very, very short hiring process. It's like initial pre-screen, go to initial telephone call. If that's all good, go to a face-to-face or a Zoom call or something along those lines. At absolute max, an additional phone call with someone in the team, but that's more to give them a bit more confidence in who we are as a business, to make sure we're a right fit, and then make an offer. So it's a very quick process. It should something that goes from first conversation to an offer within about a week and a half. So what would someone who's having 5 interviews, 6 interviews actually be getting from each interview? Do you think there's actually a value in doing that, or is it just something that's the norm?
It's becoming the norm now. They'd say it gives you more of a chance to meet people in the company. My argument would say, okay, then double load them up. Then have 2 people in one interview. Don't have an interview with one person 1 week. It just elongates the process, right? But equally as well, you then generate basically a shared opinion of the person, right? You can sit there and debate the quality of the interview for 2 people, right? But perspective. I think a lot of it as well there is that they think that they now want more people invested in that choice, right? Which, to a certain extent makes sense for a senior hire. If you're hiring someone of a C-suite director level, you want to meet the CFO, CEO, CTO, potentially director of HR. It makes total sense. But what you're seeing is more mid-range roles that are having, meeting, the recruiter first of all, then they're meeting the manager, then they're meeting the director, then they're meeting colleagues, and it's then having to do like a case study or a test there, go into the office. So all of this is basically taking hours upon hours of time, travel costs, all of that into place there. And 9 times out of 10, you then left with a substandard experience and substandard feedback, because it's like, I spent 4 interviews now. If you guys met 10 people, spent £100 traveling, time doing the presentation, to then get an email saying, thank you for applying, but we'll go with somebody else. And from the back of that, you get nothing constructive in feedback. You get no details as to what you did wrong, what you did right. So again, next time you go to interview elsewhere, you don't know how to basically to adapt your style, or how to react, or how to, take a new approach to it. Because again, you spent all that time there, and then you come away with nothing. And that's the problem, isn't it? Is like, job hunting is very much like going to the gym, eating clean and training, and seeing no growth or seeing no weight loss, because all that effort you put into it, training, preparation, diet, the focus, same with job hunting. But to get all of that way and do all the effort and see zero impact of what your efforts are given you is analogously same as going gym and eating clean, lifting weights and nothing happening.
Taking a step back, so just rewind, because you said something that was quite interesting there, that you don't get feedback that you get that far into the interview and it's just you and one other person that you're being pitted against. You get told, oh, you're going to go with the other person. Maybe it was just a personality choice, or would that still even be valued in feeding that back? Because you were both really good candidates, you both had really good talent, and it was actually, I just gelled with this person, or I find them a lot easier to get on with. Do you think that's the same again, or not so much? Is there value in that?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because of course I've had it where I've had feedback that was basically flimsy, and I'm like, it's fine. It's a face fit, right, or personality fit, which no matter what you have on your CV, what background you have, the answers you give, if they don't like you as a person, you can't change that. So you can sit there and be professional, articulated, respectful as a person, but if that whole interaction don't gel with you and go, right, can this person be part of our team? Can I work with them 8 hours a day, in the office? And if they can't say yes to that, no matter how good your skill set is, they probably won't go with you regardless, right? But people are scared to give feedback, right? There's very few that are taught in a company how to give feedback in interviews. A lot of it's self-taught. People shy away from it because it's easy to go into an email and hit no thank you, rather than pick up the phone and say, hey, look, appreciate your time over the process there. Really valued your input and efforts there. It's a no, but here's why. You actually would get a lot more respect from people doing that, but also what you generate is what we call boomerang candidates. Those that enjoyed the experience and thought, do you know what? I didn't get it this time. I liked how you dealt with me as a candidate. I felt seen. The feedback was constructive. And actually, I can work on that. So do you know what? There's a role going again here. I'll apply again, rather than thinking, right, it's been 4 stages, no feedback, basically a door slam in the face to say no, thank you. And also, again, that impacts customers, right? Because I think Virgin Media did a whole entire case study on this, where a bad candidate experience actually affects their bottom line of sales and customers.
Oh, really? Wow. So they're saying that the people who are applying for the jobs were then put off by that brand as a whole, and that company as a
Mm-hmm.
whole want to.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. It's really interesting to hear it from that point of view. Okay. So you kind of touched on the point where I was going to go with the second part, which is where people just ghost you. And you've started to go into the whole training angle. And my initial thought was, is it because people just really don't know how to give feedback? And we talk about a shit sandwich, we give a good bit of feedback where the negative is, and then we give a bad bit of feedback, etc. So what is the driver behind the ghosting from your point of view, and obviously the experience that you've had? Why do people ghost? Is it just a modern day thing that's just accepted?
Yeah, I think, look, it's societally, people do it all the time now, right? You get in dating,
Yeah.
you go on a date with
Yeah.
someone, and then you unmatch them on a dating app, right? We've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
um,
On the receiving end of
so
it, yeah.
yeah. I'm the receiving, not the instigator, right? So I think it's too easy now just to basically send an email, unmatch with somebody, hit reject on a screen there. Recruitment's lost that human touch of actually putting in phone calls. Long gone are the days where you had a lot of like interaction with the candidate via a phone. I've been in stages where I've had like 3 or 4 steps now where I've not spoken to the recruiter. Yes, I've had manager interviews face to face like now, but as a recruiter, they've just hid behind emails, and it's like, that again, you're an ambassador to that company there. How can I warm to the business or warm to you if you just hide behind emails? And it's also, again, like setting agendas. Like if you interview, right, we're interviewing this week, let you know by Friday, then it comes on to Monday. Where's the update? So, yeah, the problem is it's training around how to give feedback. It's the fear of giving feedback, the fear of, obviously, in the US, right, you can't really give feedback because, of course, of the whole risk of
Liable
lawsuits,
to
right?
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
exactly.
you have to keep this, say it's a no this time. But in the UK, we're free of that, right? And
Hmm.
use the freedom of speech to help, soften the blow of being told no, right? Because, rejection hurts, whether it is in dating or careers, right? And again, both of them are so analogous, right? Because interviews are like dates and whatnot, and you get your hopes up. Always one person likes the other person more than the other person, right? It's very
Hmm.
rarely is it a match made in heaven. But if you're going to tell somebody no, explain why. And often than not,
Mm.
it's often the person that it could be the company. Either after interviewing you, we've realised now that perhaps the role isn't what we need it to be. We need to take down the role and rebrand it. Or actually, after interviewing you, we realise that we actually need someone who has got experience in engineering or tech IT data, or just says, well, we met with you, but unfortunately, we felt like there was a disconnect in your answers, or you didn't really quite answer them as concisely as somebody else. All this is feedback, right, for you to even know, right, I couldn't have impacted that. It's basically a business choice and not great, but it helps. Or, yeah,
Hmm.
right, I didn't do so well then, but here's how I improve. But also, as well, you think for the time and you maintain communication and think, right, let's not burn a bridge, because then next time it could be a short-term contractor. Dom did a great interview. Dom was thankful about his feedback, and we stayed in touch. But you literally burn so many bridges by giving like no feedback or just generic emails, and people think it's just a quick case of just that's it. But the long-lasting impact of that is quite severe. And there's
Mm.
now companies now I would never work for, or interview at, or buy their products based on how I've been treated. Now they won't go under tomorrow because of just me as a consumer. But if that's how they treat candidates on a wider scale, right, then that's just not me who's not buying the products, right, or applying to them again. It's other people.
Exactly. And maybe it was, good that you didn't get the job, because if that's the way they treat people internally initially, then, are you starting to get an idea behind closed doors? Or coming on to my next point, behind glass doors. So what's your view on Glassdoor as a whole? I was intrigued to think, I've always wanted to ask a recruiter this question because I know it from
Mm,
a candidate point of view, and I've heard so many candidates review it. But from a
mm.
recruiter point of view, what do you think of Glassdoor?
I think it's the only real decent thing that you have now as a point of reference as to how a company treats its staff. I think,
Mm.
but the problem you have then is often it's filtered with reviews of disgruntled ex-employees. It's a
Yeah.
really weird.
Okay.
It's both ends of the spectrum, right? If you've got disgruntled employees that got shafted at a bonus, paid job, or bad manager who are going to go on there and just spit nails at the company, give them
Hmm.
ones and twos. You then got the opposite end of the scale there, where they basically incentivize staff and go, "We'll give you a £10 Amazon voucher if you go and leave us a great review," or the manager sat over your desk looking at you, going, "Leave us a review now. Make sure it's a good one." So
Yeah.
no one generally feels, I don't know about you've agreed, but no one generally feels compelled to go on and think, I've had a really good onboarding here. I really love my time here 9 months down the line. I'm going to go and
Agreed.
write a Glassdoor review. So
Yep.
interviews too, again, I have always left interview feedback at Glassdoor. I feel that's more human and more realistic, right? Because sometimes it could
Hmm.
be a case of good experience, didn't get a job, nice company, but I've I've gone on to them, been honest, said, look, did this, did that, interviewed these stages here, so you know again the stages that they go through. You let them know the salary range to give future candidates insights to what they're going to get paid, and just said the outcome wasn't great, and you rate it fairly, right? So I think feedback about the company, try and find on it either current employees now, add them on LinkedIn, just say, hey, I've been interviewing right now for a role in finance. What's it like working there? Or you can search on people that were basically past companies of that employer and say, hey, you left the company last year, you left for 5 years, I'm interviewing there now. Hope you don't mind just quickly answering what it was like working there. How did you find it? Again, you never know why they might have left. Could have been good news, good reasons, bad reasons, but you'll probably get a more open opinion from someone directly there that you can see and talk to about their time there than looking at Glassdoor reviews. Because let's face it, someone there always go about, you can always tell when someone was micromanaged, how their review
Yeah.
looks, or someone was, it was a restructure. And again, it was a case of like poor foresight and management because they didn't foresee the restructure. So you always can build up a construct of like, this person's reviews based on them getting redundant, or this person had a bad manager, or this person was basically made to work longer hours. So it's, don't take it as obviously gospel with a pinch of salt, right? But generally, if you've got 3 out of 5 stars and lots of reviews, probably a reason why.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to juggle that though and work it out, isn't it? And understand where to take that and how to interpret that data and all that information
Mm-hmm.
that's there. Okay, so we've explored quite a lot there, and we've got some top tips from you. One of the things I thought that was really interesting in our conversation before this call was your point around being a disruptor. So obviously the podcast being titled Innovators, Disruptors, Leaders, and your goal is to be seen as a disruptor, but one of the things is that you don't like is this negative connotation which is seen as when you describe yourself as a disruptor or you're on a disruptive path. And that's the first time I've ever heard someone say that. I've always seen it as a positive thing. So I was really keen to hear a bit more about that and where that negative connotation could come from and what that could mean from your point of view. So what have you heard out there, as it were?
Yeah, I think it's more a case if you put a disruptor, and even I joined another podcast that was called Tier Disruptors. I still think as well, the word disruptor implies to go to somewhere, knock things over, cause a fracas, flip the bird and walk out. It's like a disruptive manner. But I think it's a case of even though I see myself as being that person, I'm disruptive in a way of I want things to basically be done correctly and
Yep.
differently. So I'm disrupting what has been the pillars of recruitment for decades, right? It's done transactionally. So people will call me a disruptor probably in the industry, right, in a negative light. Now, societally, I'm a disruptor in a positive light, but because I'm sat there challenging people, saying to CPOs, I had a pretty bad experience here. You should know about this, which is, they need to know, right? Rather than just basically taking it as a lick on the chin and going, don't work there. No, let me tell the CPO, the HRD, why it was bad to work there. So I also call out bad behaviours. I call out ethics and morals around processes. I don't ever tag companies, right? Because again, it's reputational damage and it's just, again, not seen good by me. But
Of
I'll
course.
always challenge the status quo as to why recruitment's the way it is. From that, I'm basically sat on the fence of that of a recruiter that I've been for 10 years, but also that of the candidate saying, I see you, I get you, I hear your frustrations. As a recruiter, let me just get you peer over the fence and see what we do here and how we do it and explain why things happen the way they do. So that way, it's some grain of comfort that how they're treated, we don't agree with it. And things like, not advertising salaries and jobs. Recruiters don't choose to do that, right? That's not my choice.
Yeah, of
That's a
course.
business choice. But
Yeah, yeah.
we're then left with that moniker that we're the bad guys. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm disrupting the way that I want to lift the lid on recruitment. And it's not putting out any dirty secrets, right? It's not that taboo. It's more around here's why a role gets reposted. Here's why you could be rejected. Here's, why we don't advertise salaries. So I'm there to kind of basically enlighten people on recruitment, right? But also as well push companies to say, why do you need a degree on that job advert for a tier manager? Because ultimately you want 10 years experience and you want a degree. Well, the 10 years experience is then basically taking preference over the degree because there's no relevance to it. So I will challenge that because I think, again, it's a case of we don't like good job adverts at the time. We don't make them, inclusive. We don't do a fair recruitment process. We definitely don't give feedback. So if you look at it as a whole, as a collective, there's a few that do it well, and there's a few that you shout out and say, right, kudos to you. But there are a small few in a dirty pond, as an analogy, of current recruitment process and practices. And candidates are wise to that. And that's why you're probably seeing a lot more people that are working fractionally, being their own boss, doing freelancing, because they've lost trust in employers and how they treat people. Because again, like that first impression of how they treat you in the candidate experience is setting you up for how you're going to be treated as an employee, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's, first impressions count from that point of view. And like you say, if the job ads aren't, the job ads aren't written that well, and they're not necessarily written from a diverse or inclusive point of view, then, you're going to be setting yourself up to fail. But I think it's great when you go out and disrupt something, because that's obviously the essence of every great leader. Anyone who comes into a business and doesn't look at, especially when they're in a leadership position, and they don't look at disrupting something or challenging why do you do that? Oh, we do it because we've always done it. Well, let's unpick that. And is that the best way to do that? And not necessarily changing things for change's sake, but I think it's important to bring in new ideas and fresh blood and all of those kind of analogies that come with with obviously bringing new people into the business, which is really important. So from my point of view, I've always seen disruptor as a positive thing, but it's very interesting. I could see where you're coming from when you say you see it, or you hear that people say it's a negative thing, and it's probably more their ignorance or the fact that you're pushing them to change. And obviously change management's one of the hardest things to actually execute well. So yeah, when you're asking people to change voluntarily, it's never going to be voluntarily. It's always going to be forced through, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's why, again, I started Maverick Otter to help people change by delivering workshops, training courses with leaders to say, right, here's your current process now in recruitment. Here's how it's
Mm-hmm.
done. Here's what you do really, really well. Here's what needs consideration right now. Here's with AI integration in the future, consider that. But for them to sit there and say, Dom, we're not doing things great right now. We think we might need your help, takes a lot of submissiveness and a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability, which not a lot of companies are going to do right now, are they? No one's going to
Yeah.
sit there and admit to you, whether it's publicly or privately, we don't think our house is in order of recruitment, because again, that's what they're paying head of TA, director of TA, head to HR to do, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
get them to kind of say that we feel right now that it's not being great, makes you then wonder, well, who's steering the ship now that actually thinks it's okay to kind of run that kind of that process? But it's so, to your point, you're right there. That's why it is. It's seen as, again, like it's as a threat, but in a way that's positive, to change the mindset and the approach to basically make it better for candidates, right? Because that's what we care about, right? As a recruiter, I'm old school, but I still think we've lost the element of candidate experience and candidate care. And that's why, again, you saw for the first time in 2021, there was more recruiter jobs out there than developers.
Mm-hmm.
Unheard of. That was the kickback
Mm-hmm.
from COVID. And in doing so, they hired a lot of people that weren't really recruiters. A lot of them haven't been trained since then properly. So they've got this overhang of people that recruitment roles actually don't recruit or can't recruit.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're making hiring choices too as well. So my goal is just trying to call out bad behaviours and ethics rights, and hope that someone goes, this guy's not a moaner. I hate to say a thought leader, right? But it's the only way to kind of describe it is that, why is recruitment the way it is now? Why can't we make it engaging? Why can't we have, for example, job emails saying thanks for applying to our jobs? They're all the same. They're all very cold and very just like, we'll be in touch. Whereas, thanks for applying. By the way, check out our careers page. By the way, here's what the steps to be in the process. It's 3 stages. And just set out your shop early. Be transparent, because right now
Yeah.
it's very cloak and dagger. There's no transparency anymore in recruitment. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
a bit of transparency creates warmth and buy-in from the candidate, and that's why, again, there's a disengagement from candidates and companies right now.
Yeah, got you. Absolutely. Wise words there from you, Dominic. Really interesting to hear your points of view. And I do invite everyone who is listening to this podcast to go and check out Dominic's profile on LinkedIn. You are also a top voice on LinkedIn as well, so one definitely worth following. And the link for Dominic's profile is below in the description on the IDL podcast page if you are listening to this on any other channel. So thank you, Dominic, for your time. Really greatly appreciated. Any other last words or words of wisdoms or snippets or sound bites you'd like to share with the audience, or have we squeezed the orange as much as we possibly can here?
Pretty much, I just think, yeah, challenge status quo. If you see something that needs changing, call it out, but just call it out in a way that's going to be, champion better processes, not in a way that's bitter or spiteful or resentful. But as a collective, if obviously we all start calling it out, things have got to start changing, right? So yeah, just demand better from recruiters like me if you see that it's poor behaviour.
Absolutely. Really interesting. Thank you very much, Dominic. Really appreciate it. And thank you very much for your time. And thank you, everyone, who has joined us on this episode.